All right, we want to say good evening for those who are listening to and looking at the Houston Media Source television broadcast, public affairs and public relations just for you. Uh, we are in a period of time right now where there are a number of major issues affecting our society, our communities, the worldwide community. It's just so much going on right now. I don't know where to start, but I have some distinguished guests with me tonight. Dr. Bobby Mills, sociology, a professor of mine from the great Texas University. And of course, we got Ron Reynolds, Representative Ron Reynolds here this evening, be here briefly. And of course, Reverend Carl Matthews and my good friend, Mr. Charles X. White. We want to talk about it from a certain perspective. But first, let's go in with State Representative Ron Reynolds, who I'm assuming is still in Washington, D.C. First, I want to say congratulations. We just noticed that you were given another assignment as a servant, and you've done an outstanding job thus far dealing with these Texas leaders who are a little confused. But let's hear from Representative Reynolds. We want to really get your insight. Come on, Representative Reynolds.
Good evening, everyone. I bring you greetings from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. It is good to see a lot of brothers who I have a great deal of admiration and respect for. So I will be in Washington, D.C. I was there for the historic signing. I wish it was a signing, but the bill passing of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Bill, H.R. 4, it almost brought tears to my eyes to see that bill pass and the struggle that John Lewis and so many other pioneers whose shoulders that I stand on, that we all stand on today, that made tremendous sacrifices to end voter suppression and Jim Crow laws across the South and across this nation. And so it was great to witness that. And I'm here looking forward to continuing to build momentum so that we can get the U.S. Senate to pass H.R. 1, the For the People Act, and H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. The Senate is currently on recess. We need to continue to push them to break the filibuster, to make a carve-out exception so that we can get this federal voting rights legislation passed. Because literally, as we speak right now, on the floor of the Texas House in the state capital of Austin, right now they're debating Senate Bill 1, the voter suppression bill, the bill that we fled and broke quorum for. So unfortunately, some of my Democratic colleagues came back, they broke quorum. Now they're going to pass this bill on a straight party line vote. They're debating the bill right now. If the bill will pass before, within the next few hours, the bill will be, it'll pass on first reading, and then tomorrow it'll pass on second reading, and I'm sure the governor will be signing it pretty soon thereafter. And the only hope that we have to nullify this law is if we get federal voting rights legislation passed to preserve and protect all states, including Texas. So I want to say the fight is not over. Elections matter. Elections have consequences, and Republicans, and mind you, on that John Lewis Voting Rights Bill, the last time that they reauthorized the Voting Rights Act, it passed 98-0 in 2006 by the Senate. 98-0. There was no opposition. That was under former President Bush from Texas. Then the House passed it overwhelmingly. Maybe there was a few no votes, but the point is, just fast forward to when this bill passed in the House, there was 0 Republican votes for it. 0 Republican votes for it in the House. Now the Senate, there's been 0 support for it from Republicans. So why do I bring that up? It's because we're getting past the point where we have statesmen doing what's best for the country, and we have this Trump era where people are doing what's best for partisan political purposes. So I'm here in DC continuing to fight, trying to hold it down. And I appreciate all of you all for all the prayers, all the support, everything that you've done to encourage us and keep us fighting. We're going to keep fighting and speaking truth to power. And I am not going to give up until we kill all of these voter suppression, Jim Crow 2.0 bills that are popping up in Texas and across this country.
But I know that you might have to leave us, so I wanted to make sure all of us, if you have a question or thought to give to Representative Reynolds, take the time now to do it. But I guess my only one question would be, do people feel like in Washington that we're up against some type of civil disorder for people of color to not be able to vote, or make it more complicated? That really confuses me. I'm an independent, but the point is, I go with the leadership. So, do people up in Washington feel like y'all up there, fighting against some kind of rebellious leadership that wouldn't listen to his people? What is that all
Reverend
about?
Gilmore, people of Washington know that Texas is already one of the most difficult places to vote. And really what this bill is an assault on Harris County. So everybody on this that I see here on the Zoom is from the greater Houston area. This bill would take away a lot of the things that Houston and Harris County did. For example, drive-through voting would be eliminated. Mobile voting, no. 24-hour voting, no. Those voting centers at Reliant and NRG, no. Empowering partisan poll watchers so that they can come in, the Proud Boys coming in the Fifth Ward and Acres Home and Sunnyside to intimidate our people. They ain't going to River Oaks and Bel Air. They coming in the hood to intimidate people. This bill is not about voter integrity. It is about voter suppression and voter intimidation. And that's why we have to stand up for that precious fundamental right to vote. That is the most fundamental right that we have as American citizens, is the right to vote, because your vote is your voice. And so I've been on Charles X. White. We've had dialogue about this on his show as well. And I want to thank you and him for using your platform so that we can have a dialogue and keep people engaged so that people stay woke, because elections matter. Elections have consequences. And right now, they're trying to roll back many of the protections that we had. It's an assault on our democracy, and too many people shed blood and died for it.
Reverend, it goes, State Rep, it goes deeper than that. Your vote is democracy itself.
That's
because
right.
Without the precious right individually to vote your choice, there is no democracy.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's a deep spiritual concept.
That's right. Well, gentlemen, I gotta get ready for this other deal, but I wanted to be on here. I appreciate you all. Let's keep the faith and let's keep the fight. Okay, I'm with you.
Appreciate you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Keep it up.
Thank you. Bye. All right, bye.
I want to go back to that. I want to go back to the observation, Dr. Mills. I've been trying to get some type of awareness that, me and you have talked about, all of us have talked about, really, about the divide between mental illness and the problems that are exacerbated when people don't get that kind of support, care, whatever, and, all those other factors that might lead to over and against evil, and it really makes you want to think that evil has a purpose, which would, in our case, even with what Ron was just talking about, this voting, would destroy or take away some of these elements that are associated with democracy, as you put it. What I kind of lean into that thought there.
Well, first of all, I think we have to recognize that evil has no boundaries. And we can see now that what many folk who are white are really concerned about is the cultural changes that are taking place in the society, whereby the minority groups are becoming the majority. So eventually, no longer will America's society in terms of population be primarily white. So minorities are becoming the majority in terms of population. And of course, racism itself is demonic. You know, it is the epitome of what evil is. Because if you think that you're better than another human being simply because of your skin tone, you got a real problem with God. You don't have a problem with individuals that you hate. You have a God problem.
So
I know Brother Charles White can agree with that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Going on, Charles.
Well, I'm gonna throw a boomerang out there. The subset elements that are attached to the main body of democracy, those are also weaponized. And you can see it in the neighborhood when you have low performing schools, food deserts, unemployment, crime, and all the other subsets that go with it. You know, my question would be, I pondered the question, if we all go through the same system, the educational system, why is there so many areas of statistics that Black people fall in the negative category? We all being educated by educators, whether they white or Black. The school system in Texas votes on the system and develops it. So where is the gap that allows more numbers of Black children to have failing grades and discipline write-ups at schools? Where is the solution for that gap in the democracy? Because see, voting is one piece of the electoral process. You got several threads that come off of voting. For an example, I hear this a lot of times now, Dr. Bobby Mills, you know, I might need some help on this. But what I've said is this. When they say voting, that's your right, and that's what you need to do, you need to vote. Okay, but we also need to understand the power of a political action committee. We also need to understand public policy. Instead of us going to city hall meetings for 20 or 30 years talking about dumping tires, we're not talking about changing the policy or city code that the city hides behind because they don't come up with a solution. I can take you to spots in Fifth Ward and Scenic Wood and Sunnyside where tires have been dumped since 1986. Why is that? You telling me that all the police chiefs we had, all the mayors we had, all the city council people we had couldn't find the solution between 1986 and now to have a control or more systematic approach to deterring dumping tires, illegal dumping. So I see everything from a practical practitioner's lens. I can find the gap. If I find the gap, I should be able to find a solution. We know where the crime is. On crime, you said something about that when we were talking over the phone.
Right.
We don't ask the right question. Just like we don't ask politicians the right questions and we don't get that much in return. The point is that here's for an example about crime, and I'm gonna turn it over to you, Dr. Gilmore. I was at a workshop and a guy made a comment. Now he's a guy that does research on criminology. He said, we have been asking the wrong question about crime and crime reduction. He said the question we need to ask is, how many cases are they closing? That's where the rubber meets the road. Cases that are being closed. Why we don't ever hear about white collar crime? All we hear is about crime in our neighborhood, basically. So we have to redefine a lot of things, because right now, if we keep asking the same questions, we can project 20 years from now, we'll all be in jail.
That was a profound thought. I certainly would agree, because going down some neighborhoods in Houston, I've never seen tires on the side of the road. You know, I'm talking about over on Shepherd, right, going through Kirby, River Oaks, and Memorial. You don't never see tires. So we might be talking about two different cities. I think we are, because I believe the educational city, the system in Houston is different on one side of town as opposed to the other. But Houston Ministers Against Crime representative and program coordinator, along with one of the many hats he wears, he might be able to have an insight on that thought. Dr. Matthews, you have a perspective on that?
Well, thank you, man. And yes, sir, I'm here. I thank you. I was reflecting on a point that Brother Charles mentioned several years ago at one of his breakfasts. And if my computer go in and out, I'm having some connection problems. So I'm gonna do the best I can, fast as I can. One thing he mentioned that really enlightened me was that when we pay taxes in our communities, our taxes should serve for public service like any other community that pay taxes. And that really stuck with me. And when I live in the 77009, which is Fifth Ward area.
He might be the one out. You can double check that for us, Mark. But I guess let me continue that point. I think one of the ideas I've had is that, is evil a dictate of the leadership mindset? I hope that makes a little sense. In other words, people want to use this Republican or Democrat or Green Party or whatever as a organization, but when people get into these mindsets, you understand what I'm saying, Dr. Mills and Mr. Charles, the idea that people have a mindset to do evil or use the position to continue. You know, history has already taught us that. Good to see you. OG1 is here. Mr. Reginald Gordon, he's one of our premier leaders in the community trying to address this issue of crime. We're kind of going into that thought right now. I know y'all got a big program coming up this weekend. OG, we want to hear a little bit about that and the second one, really. But anyhow, my thought, are you back with us, Matthews? Can you?
Yeah,
come on, finish that point. You were making a point before you went out. You froze on us. You done froze again. But OG, take the thought of the crime. The point was made earlier by Minister Charles X. White about the other variables, and I was making a point about evil leadership in people's mind. Make that point, OG. Help us with some of that. Is it evil leadership that leads us or individuals and communities to then become involved in crime? I'm not taking anything against evil or mental illness, but the variables, I guess I'm saying, you know, the education, know this, know that, whatever.
Well, evil comes from lack of God consciousness. People that will engage in and practice evil, they have no God conscience. When you have no conscience, you will do evil, think evil.
Which is abnormal.
Abnormal.
Which is abnormal, which then sends you into an abnormal definition, if that's possible, because we don't use a definition for evil when we have actions that are being perpetrated on people, whether it's the tragic shooting the other day of the New Orleans officer, you know, the tragic circumstances of, I think I just saw one recently, the man 33, you know, killed his mother, shot his father, you know. See, Charles, I think that's one of the things that we don't want to put in a relationship to what education denies us, if that makes any sense. OG, can you hear me?
I can hear you well, brother. How y'all doing now?
This is good, man. Give me some thought on that, OG. I know you have been a advocate of helping, trying to get young men out of crime, but some of the factors that you often, you know, articulate. You need to hear some of that.
Well, I appreciate that, on this statement here dealing with violence and evil and things on that level. But I say to this, I just come back from showing my team, my recovery coach team, a video and say the mask we live within. You're saying that mask we live within, hyper-masculinity dealing with males and male figures and how we, especially Black men, and I specifically say Black men specifically, when we refuse to deal with how we deal with our depression, oppression, and it goes back to what I've always said. Once I learned about trauma-informed trauma, how do we untreated trauma? How do we deal with untreated trauma? Have we ever had any services or help for our untreated trauma as young Black men or Black men, period? You know what I'm saying? And then to go to some of these trainings to find out transgenerational trauma that have never been dealt with or even talked about. You know what I'm saying? So how we express ourselves. And I was showing in this video how, especially young Black men, we don't know how to deal with depression from within. We express it in an aggressive way, like explode on one another. So until we go back in our own personal communities and deal with how young men at an early age from the family deal with our adverse childhood experiences to deal with some of the trauma that we're dealing with and exploding on one another. We're going to constantly, year after year, deal with the pain that we never resolved as children.
Excellent.
And Dr. Gilmore, while I got a chance, I thought about what my brother said earlier. Watchman Nee said there are three aspects in which humanity kind of function: God conscious, world conscious, and self-conscious. And so I think, alluding to the evil, those who are not operating in a God-conscious mindset are functioning in a self-conscious mindset, which segues me into another thought of someone saying the master didn't get therapy, nor did the slave get therapy. And so if you have untreated behaviors, cultural dynamics that breeze up, and when people thinking they're right when it's wrong, and this power and this mindset of control and classes of people, that puts it in the evil category.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Dr. Gilmore, let me say this here again. As a young man, I say this all the time. How did I end up in prison with 200 years? And I was very, very angry at Black men because the man that I looked up to abandoned me, rejected me, and had nothing to do with me, but he made me many promises. So therefore, when I traveled my journey through the roads of Houston, doing my dirty work, whether I was robbing, stealing, or killing, I took a lot of evil out on Black men. Like I tell people, it wasn't right, but my mindset at that time, even though I hated myself, I hated the Black men that abandoned me. Just like I said, on the issue with the brothers that even now, they ask me, why would you go to that area and see Black men enjoying themselves, having a great time, eating out on the patio, you know what I'm saying? And I say that dealing with a lot of the brothers that I deal with, they call them hood knights, brothers that come out of urban areas that's coming out of violent gun violent zones, brothers that live up under this constant pain every day, and they branch out to these areas and see Black men living nice, enjoying life. And then you deal with brothers like me at that time in my early 16 and 15-year-olds hated Black men. So I was jealous because he was given something and expressing something that I lacked within myself. So again, it's easy for us as young men to take the pain out on people that look like us because we're jealous because they never gave it back to us. And until we bring that kind of love, security, and safety back to our neighborhood, young Black boys, today it's gonna kill us more than ever as they see us smile, enjoying life everywhere we go. So we're all in trouble as good Black men if we don't really recognize what Ray Ray and Pookie is dealing with coming out the urban warfare zones.
I was thinking when he said that, Dr. Mills, Charles, the idea of internalizing our cultural experience on somebody else, whether it's Black, white, or whatever. But at the same time, where would the violence come in? Is the violence a reaction? Is the violence our last voice? I mean, where does that come in? I mean, I'm just curious, Dr. Mills, when you say God, we don't have God in us, it's like, but it's enough churches, I mean, mosques, synagogues, why don't we have enough God in us?
Well, I think part of the problem is that we never learned how to go to church before we go to church.
No, wait a minute, that's kind of deep there.
Well,
you have to get some clarification.
See, church is a process that begins internally within you.
Right.
And then it is consummated in family. Okay. And unfortunately, our families are disrupted. And so consequently, a lot of young Black men and Black people in general, we grow up thinking about others rather than thinking about ourselves first. See, if you think about yourself first, you will learn how to be generous. But if you think about others first, you'll learn to be selfish because life is a paradox. See, if you think about yourself first, what is it that you're gonna know? You're gonna know yourself. And the most important thing in this world is to what? Know yourself.
Well, do you think?
But if you think about others first, the first thing you're gonna say is, "Hey, look at them. They don't do anything for themselves." So, in order for me not to be in the position that they're in, I gotta what? Go for myself. So you learn how to be selfish, and you keep your fish. Let
me ask you a question. That meshes with another thought of what happened on January 6th. Were people thinking about themselves, or were they thinking about the country to make clean the country up? I mean, I know that's a little divergent in thinking.
No, it's not. Because it's along the same line.
Well, how is that? Because most of them were white. I mean, most of the people who, for all practical reasons, jumped up and wanted to tear up the White House were white people. I mean, I'm just trying to make an observation.
Well,
what
they were thinking about is the big lie that was told to them by the former president.
No.
That the election was stolen from them. Because who would not vote for Donald Trump if you white? Because there are a considerable amount of whites that did vote for Biden. Otherwise, he could not have won in certain areas of the country. So they were thinking about that and not the country in terms of it being a multiracial society. It always has been a multiracial society because when Europeans came here, there were people of color living here.
Right.
It was never a white country. There's never been a white country. It will never be a white country. And you left Europe because you couldn't get along with each other. See, whites have never been able, they done had more wars, more whatever, than anybody else because they've never been able to get along with each other.
What amazes me, thank you, Dr. Mills, for that observation. What amazes me is when you look at every area, whether it's health, we're leading the pack, the African American community leading the pack in health disparity, sickness, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, you name it. You look at incarceration, African American most highly incarcerated. When you look at lack of treatment and services, African American leading in the lack of getting treatment and services. When you look at economic disparity, African American leading in being broke, being in poverty. When you look at employment in high level positions, African Americans the least being represented. When it's time of the hiring practices in these agencies, we're the last to be hired. You know, I mean, when you look at this, you know it's not an accident. And then what amazes me on top of that, when you have African American leaders in positions to make change who are not making the changes. And so, you know, I mean, with this type of, you know, paradigm, it's like it leads me to the point of still what is really going on, whose program that's programming us to continue to perpetuate the self-destruction of what we have in our community in all those areas. Now, I think we're amazing as a culture of people because we're all. I'm sorry?
Well, when you get through, I wanted to make a comment on what you and Dr. Mills said.
Right. Go on, Matthew.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, brother.
When Dr. Mills said they were responding to the big lie. See, the big lie connected to the evil thought that's embedded in the mindset.
This is a white country.
Right.
Yeah.
And see, the other part of it is white people have always had the imagination that they don't care nothing about the different races that's here because they were superior or are superior to all races. See, so you gotta, when you tell the big lie or a lie in the context of what we're talking about, and it connects, it's either gonna connect to the good or to the bad. And look at the people who are responding to the big lie, white folks. Then you look at, because I'm not separating Republican and Democrats because they're all the same to me.
Same, right.
The redistricting, that's segregation. That's power control. They still want to keep that generational power that they've had over everybody since they went to war in 1914, when they split up the planet on who was going to own what land worldwide, globally. So when the lie connects to the evil that's in the person, and good and bad is in all of us, but now you done brought it out because you done told this lie, and now it's not even based on fact. It's not based on nothing but what it's connected to is connected to the evil.
Yeah, that was a profound thought there because I was thinking about how, particularly when you mentioned about the 1914, how people sat down, you know, these are individual leaders of countries who sat down or sit down to divide a group of people for a purpose that could be justified in some type of legislation. You know, in other words, France owns this and Germany owns this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
America owns this, but
England
you're talking about
that.
people. Yeah. Or you come back to the room and say, well, I'm gonna sit down and OG, these people don't need to know how to read. Or this person don't need to know that they're gonna have a job. Matt, you because you're working for free. And you don't think that it's going to steamroll and come back 60, 70, 80 years later, whereby, Dr. Mills, I'm gonna make this observation, even some of the people who say they are supposed to be God conscious, pick another side of the Bible, you know, because I often believe it's two Bibles.
Well, didn't one of the popes bless the ships of slavery, slaves coming out of Spain?
They was blessed.
It connected with the evil, the lie.
Wait a minute, they was using a scripture though. It was a scripture that sent them off.
Slaves, obey your master.
That's right. It was a scripture. So I'm just trying to make an observation here.
No, I'm sitting here thinking, Brother Gilmore, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm going back to what Dr. Matthews said, and I'm connecting with Brother Charles' ex-wife said, and I'm reflecting back in my life from 30 years ago to the day now, how we done regurgitated back in our lifespan on where we at, on what Dr. Matthews said. But I can recall Charles White, one of the first brothers that we got to start dealing with personal self-growth and how we get out of this stuff through our own personal resources that we use to find strong Black men to challenge a system that we know that's keeping us moving back. And when I go back to Brother Charles White, I'm going back almost 30 years when Brother Charles White set up the first town hall meeting inside the prison, right, bringing in judges, bringing in the outside people to see from within the monster how we open up the doors to rechange the mind of what's going on in the country from the belly of the beast.
Well, let me stop right there, because that might be an insight. I had said that earlier, Charles, about how we repeat things. I mean, do you think the judges and the rest of them, like what you said, would be willing to do that now?
No. Listen, let me say this, since he said that. That's going back to 1986. Okay? Now, one of the things that I wanted the public to see was the way brothers was handling brothers. Because when I went to the program as my first assignment with juvenile probation, I was hooked. Because if you look at the psychology, the compassion, and the insight that was being imparted to them young folk by brothers that were trying to express solutions for people that's outside to stay out, and then articulate principles while they're inside, so when they come outside, they'll have a future. That to me was amazing when I saw G-Man and Sammy and what's the other, Joe Knox, right? Yeah, and Green was crazy. I do want you to know Green was crazy. But anyway,
don't you think they were doing therapy?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
That was therapy. G-Man was doing therapy. He was doing self-therapy. He was spreading it out in the city. Because look, the people, just so you know how this happened, Gilmore, the warden, his name was Jenkins, Warden Jenkins. He stuck his neck out because there had never been a public forum, community forum inside the penitentiary in the state of Texas ever.
No, I believe
he stuck it because we had the cameras there. We had the news there.
Yeah, right.
So the point is that Black man stuck out his neck because he believed in the program too.
But I think that's what Dr. Mills, you were saying about people need therapy. How do you get it if you don't have certain people who open to the truth to help somebody else get the truth, right, so they can get to the God conscious? See, to me, it's like, how do we get people, individuals to be struck like what, Mr. Charles is saying? Because you got to bring certain people. It might not be a priest or chaplain or somebody. It might be. It
might be a G-man. See, because you said the right word. You said the right word. G-Man was sharing truth, insight,
right,
with
right.
compassion.
Which leads you to a God conscious.
There you go.
Well, the only
See,
way,
Dr. Mills, that's what I'm saying. Huh?
I was going to say, the only way we can really, as a society, get to the point where the society has God consciousness is that white people will have to de-whiteize themselves.
What? Say
Black
what?
folk are going to have to de-slave-tize themselves.
Charles, you ever
Yeah,
heard that term?
that's pretty deep there. Yeah, that's
Kinda deep.
that's a new group of words.
Looking at it.
Oh, listen, he gonna have to clarify that word because I ain't never heard it. Say it again so we can get it.
And that word born again. He mean born again.
Yeah. OG, you better get that word now. Come on, Dr. Bill, say that again.
Yeah, white folk got to de-whiteize themselves.
Yeah.
De-whiteize.
So listen, you know what? With that point, the guy.
Wait a minute. Say it again, Dr. Mills. What'd you say?
Whites will have to de-whiteize themselves.
Okay.
And blacks must de-slave-tize themselves.
Two what? I'm sorry. Going on, Dr. Matthews. That was two new terms that's been put into the English language.
I love them. Listen, so the warden in Angola, and we know Angola was known to be a bloodbath.
Okay.
That brother, that his mother's words, who told him not to forget where he came from in his position of power. He brought in a theological school, and those guys began to have a seminary, and they started demonstrating love, as we've been talking about, and it turned around that whole prison system from being the bloodbath. And it was amazing being there for 3 days over a weekend. And you know what happened to him? He was another person in leadership who had compassion and courage to make a change and a difference. As a result of it, he got fired as warden, and they had to end up giving him a job here in the state prison, I think, here in Texas. And so it says to me that it goes back to one thing, the kind of leadership that we have in leadership that see the problem and want to make a difference and allow love. And you know what's amazing to me also is that you have so many grassroots organizations like OG and Brother White and Brother Mills and ourselves who doing the work. And we go to these institutions to share our insight, input, and be available to work with them, and they ignore our voices. They ignore our voices like we don't know what we're talking about. I mean, it's amazing to me of the attitude that they embrace in just ignoring us as though we don't have a say. To me, that's like, again, taxation without representation, to where my voice no longer is a voice. And my input has no value.
I was thinking about that, Mr. Charles, when you say if you had continued that program for 30 years, going in and out the prison, obviously you would have been all over the state of Texas because it was needful, it was helpful. You know.
Did I hear you right? They stopped. G-Man, you might correct me on this or fill in the blanks, but I think the Operation Outreach lasted for, was it 12 years, G-Man?
Well, I started it in 83, so I got out of there in 95. So it stopped in 95 once I left.
Okay. Now, the prison didn't want to pick it up.
Didn't want to pick it up.
I made a presentation to the Styles unit in Beaumont and explained it to them, and actually brought some people from Beaumont to the Central Farm to see the program. The prison is really not designed for reform. The prison is the ever-present shadow of slavery and free labor.
And now mental illness.
Okay, so the root of the penitentiary right now is slavery. There's a connection at the hip that's undeniable. It's factual. It's research. It's history. It's documented. When Bobby introduced into the lexicon 2 new terms, both of them from both perspectives, it's hard for us to deal with it because there's so much pain in the facts of the matter. It's pain for white folks to know that they ain't all of this in a bag of chips. That's pain.
Right.
If you're gonna take their control, that's pain. If you start talking about black women being raped and black men being burned at the stake and whipped and all of that, beat and all that, put in a hot box.
Castrated.
When they do that, when you start talking about that as black people, you wasn't never in no hot box or on no chain or whatever. But even the thought of it, you can relate to is so clear. You say, shit, I don't want to see this. I don't want to hear this. So that detox that we got to go through in the mental stress of 400-500 years of oppression. Damn, man, how you gonna? And we on the downside of it, oppression. We wasn't the oppressor. If the oppressor get to thinking about him losing power, that's pain to him. But we got the physical pain and the mental pain.
You know what I was thinking about when you said that? Wait a minute, OG. I thought about what Reynolds said about the vote rights. In other words, if to revisit the fact that was just a few years ago. I want you to get some more lashes though to think I'm gonna send you back.
But I'm connecting what Brother Charles White said, dealing with that long term of 500 years of pain, misery, and suffering. Yeah. I'm bringing that up to date. Just a couple of weeks ago, me, you, and Dr. Matthews visit the Crime Stoppers session to sit down to watch Andy Kahn sit up there and make black men the boogeyman of America. I'm dealing with therefore they painted this manually picture on how with this bond release thing that's happening in the jail, and they painted the boogeyman. They on a lot of the black boys that they got out of prison, 100 or 200 of them recommitted crime after getting out of jail. But again, I'm glad you was able to challenge him on his thought on how he tried to put that presentation together, on how they still today, placing black men and overlooking other crimes in this city that may match up to some of the things that black men are doing coming out of these jail systems. So even today, it goes back to where's the leadership in this city to where we can be at the helm of trying to bring some resources to change the idea, change the thing around in this city here.
Well, Chad, I know you got something going on Saturday, the second event. Could you explain what that dialogue is, objectively supposed to do?
For the last 4 years, 5 years, we've been trying to do what they've been going around the rest of the country have been doing. Chicago it's a gun violence interrupters program, training young brothers. I'm a recovery coach, training brothers coming out the institution with lived experience that know their neighborhood, that connect with a lot of the young brothers better than anybody in a professional position. They connect with the brothers better than the law enforcement. So it's grassroots built programs, training brothers how to be recovery coaches, connect with these brothers. Building areas like they have in California, Homeboy Inc. places, to make safe places to train these brothers to deal with the mental trauma that a lot of these brothers coming out of the institutions with. So we're gonna get these brothers a livable wage to go back in their community, to retrain brothers not to go back in prison. So if you retrain a lot of these brothers, they showed that within California, they showed in Oakland that over a 4-year period, during the violent intervention program, meeting violent interrupters, families that have been victimized by gun violence, meeting them at the hospital so that don't be no retaliation. Retaliation starts right at the hospital after somebody has been shot, where you need to be somebody that'll de-escalate the problem before it get back to the neighborhood. Because again, most time at the hospital, when somebody's been shot, most people that get there know who done it or who was the shooter. So trying to be a community-based program or the violence interruption program like they have in Chicago, New York, retraining brothers that got lived experience with a livable ways to connect, retrain, and get these brothers some skills and some resources so they can deal with some of the work that's going on in their own community. So this Saturday, what we've been doing.
Is it fair to ask the question, does or do they really want to train and retrain and give brothers skills? Do they really want to give equality and access to equality? Do they really want to give us access to economics? Do they really want us in corporate America in a inclusive environment? Do they really want this in America or Houston, Texas?
No.
Is that going on? Charles, say something.
Let me put it to you like this. In 1988, I worked at a workshop. Judge Eric Andale, he was one of the juvenile court judges, made a comment and said that Black children go to jail and white children go to treatment hospitals. Now, you know, in the 80s, there was a big thing with crack cocaine and all that going on in the 80s, okay? So that was the deal. So we did another workshop, and I can't think of the guy's name, but he was the president of the Association of Black Social Workers. We did another workshop like a year later, and I told a story about what the judge said about, and this guy said, Black children with insurance go to jail. So even the Black children, if they had a drug problem and had insurance, the system was not putting them on the road for recovery. They put them on the road for detention. Now you go back and look at from 1985 to about 1995, they had a service that, this is the first wraparound, that's where that word came out of, where in school systems, y'all know I was working at Worthing and Sterling back then. They had this system with the state that if a child on a campus had a problem, you could refer him to one of 13 different agencies to help address that problem.
That was, what year was that?
That was 1988. And it lasted from like 1985 to like 1995.
Yeah.
All right. In 1995, what happened? That's when they came up with zero tolerance. And they had a thing called Senate Bill 1. And that was the equal to 3 strikes and you're out. That was the equal to 3 strikes and you're out for juveniles. And they called it persistent misbehavior. So if you got 3 write-ups, you label for persistent misbehavior. Then they can put you in a county school or an alternative school with that label. Now they done took away the service part. So the numbers skyrocketed of children that were going to the alternative school and, you know, what they call it, the county alternative school, alternative education. So when we talk about this thing in a spiritual sense, you got to talk about the physical and political structure that's supporting the evil. See, the system, has a duality. And the duality is there are systems built in against us, and then there are people that are representing the system that's helping perpetuate whatever the system wants to produce. It's by design.
What you said, Dr.
In other words, the system works for the system. And the system is controlled by white men.
Right.
Just that simple. The system works for the system.
That answers some of your questions, Brother Matthews.
Well, I kind of knew the question, knew the answer. I just want the question out there, because it's very clear to me that that's not what they want to do.
Right.
Because obviously when the community approaches these systems with suggestions and recommendations that's out of the box, they have been effective. Particularly with models across the country, what Charles has done in his work, what Bobby is doing in their work with the computer labs. I mean, obviously these have been very effective, because it's like, how can you who don't live in my community tell me more about my community where I reside? I'm there, I'm in it, I hear it, I see the dysfunction, I see the abnormalities, I see the crisis that's in the community.
Right.
And so when you have people who, as OG alluded to, with the meeting we went to, and they gave these statistics of this new policing deal, and they're and demonizing us and being these demons who are just ravishing the community. Yet there was never a discussion to talk about intervention.
Stop right there.
You have 10 people who out on bonds, and you never have an intervention to come in and try to interact that.
Stop right there. OG, where's the event going to be at on Saturday?
The event going to be this Saturday from 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock. It's going to be Pastor Nash's church right here at 8903 Brandon Street in Sunnyside, Brandon Street, 8903 Brandon Street at Pastor Nash's church. Saturday morning from 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So it's going to be a roundtable discussion. We're going to bring some solutions. We want people to bring solutions and resources so we can get some of this stuff started. Just this past week, on the first week of school, young men on the school campus, I mean, it's you can see the trauma, the stress, the anxiety of young men fighting one another, and the school system definitely going to need brothers in the community to work together to change that issue.
Thank you very much. I want to say, everybody, thank you very much. It's another edition of the greatest show that we have in Houston, Public Affairs, Public Access. Thank you very much to the Houston Media Source. Next time, we'll be here to talk about what we're going to do next.
Yeah, when you really want to know what's going on, Gilmore, let me stretch out. I'll diagram it out for you.
Make sure you stay tuned and be involved. Thank you very much. I'll see y'all.
All right.
Next time.
All right.
It's a blessing.
Blessing.